Hey guys, Edward here from Edward79, the mixed content creator. Now, food that's radioactive might seem like a completely foreign concept to most of you, but get this. There are a few foods, some of which you eat every day no less, that are actually radioactive. In today's video, I'm going to be diving into why certain foods are radioactive in the first place, and whether or not you should actually be worried. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So before we actually get into the questions, there's a background question that needs to be asked. What is radiation in the first place? To put it simply, radiation is nothing more than energy given off by matter, usually traveling in either waves or high-speed particles. So what makes this dangerous, may you ask? Well, good question, because in reality, not all radiation is actually dangerous. Just to put it simply, there are two types of radiation: ionizing radiation and non-ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation is what you want to avoid, as it's high energy radiation that can damage cells and genetic material, and potentially lead to harmful mutations and cancer. However, most of the radiation you'll come across in your day-to-day life is non-ionizing radiation, which is just significantly lower in energy and oftentimes completely harmless, with common examples being visible light, radio waves, ultraviolet, and infrared. So, now that we've spoken enough about what radiation is and whether or not it's dangerous, let's get to the actual question. Why are certain foods radioactive in the first place? Well, foods can be radioactive for a few reasons. The first is primarily in foods like bananas and red meat that are high in potassium, as foods high in potassium are pretty much bound to have at least some radioactive potassium isotopes hanging out in there. Other times, however, radioactive elements are actually absorbed by the plants from the ground. Brazil nuts, for example, absorb the radioactive element radium from the soil, and as such, the radium is sometimes transferred to the nuts. Even most drinking water, for that matter, contains trace amounts of radioactive uranium and radium. So, now that we've spoken enough about what radiation is and whether or not it's dangerous, let's get to the first actual question. Why are certain foods radioactive? Well, there are actually two main ways that food can become radioactive. The first is almost always in foods like red meat or bananas that are high in potassium, as foods like these that are high in potassium are pretty much bound to have at least some radioactive potassium isotopes hanging out in there. The second way food can become radioactive is if the plants that food grows on absorbs radioactive elements from the ground. Brazil nuts, for example, will absorb the radioactive element radium from the soil, and as such, the radium is sometimes transferred to the Brazil nuts on that tree. Even most drinking water, however, contains trace amounts of the radioactive elements radium and uranium, although it's almost always in such small quantities that it's completely harmless. So now let's get to the second actual question. Should you be worried? And the answer to that question is, drumroll please, no. You do not have to worry about your food being, many of your favorite foods being radioactive. That's because even though it's often the dangerous ionizing radiation that's coming out of these foods, even the most radioactive foods like bananas and Brazil nuts have these radioactive elements in very small amounts. So small that they're pretty much completely harmless, which basically translates to the fact that you need to eat an absolutely insane amount of of even the most radioactive foods to even have a chance at getting sick from the radiation these foods emit. So, in summary, there is absolutely no reason to worry about radiation in food, as even though some foods do contain small amounts of radioactive elements, since those same radioactive elements are in such small amounts that at this point it's completely harmless and you have absolutely nothing to worry about. So there you have it. Why certain foods are radioactive and whether or not you should be afraid. We hope you enjoyed this video. As always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Wait a minute! Before we end this video, I have an announcement to make. As a follow-up to this video, I will be making a video next week about the top 10 most radioactive foods in the world, measured in picocuries per kilogram. Now, we hope you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for the upcoming top 10 and most radioactive foods in the world list. Bye!